Good morning, Joe with Mr. Tree. Today we're going to talk about diamond cutting of date palms. Diamond cutting is the effect we see in these trunks that gives you this kind of a diamond shaped effect that goes up the trunk. It makes it look more stylish and classy. This is done when the trees are first dug out of the ground and prepared to turn into a retail market where they're going to be sold to HOAs, casinos, shopping centers, these types of places that display these beautiful palm trees. This is done when the boots are still fresh and young with a special blade that cuts them. After the trees have been installed, it changes over time. This is because the palm trees are growing and the fronds are now being cut by different tree services to prune the old fronds off and get the seeds and fruit out. But as this happens, you notice that the trunk itself will change. We're going to talk about that and what these issues are and how to clean them up so they look better as you go on. Here's another example of a date palm. This one had the diamond cut down below, but the fronds were left on lower on the trunk at an earlier age. So as these were cut to remove them each year, seasonal pruning, they left these bases. This is a petiole base, commonly called a boot. So the boot is the part of the leaf base that remains attached to the trunk, and these create this basket weave sort of effect going up the base. To recreate the diamond effect, you can remove these. Sometimes they break off if you can get them right. Or they don't break off, like this one. It just doesn't come. So you have to use a chainsaw and try and cut this at an angle to recreate this type of an effect. This can work sometimes. Other times you get these broken edges that just don't look clean. Unfortunately, there's no real good way to cut this symmetrically enough to recreate this exact shape as the original diamond cut. So as the tree progresses upside, we have to change the method we do it, and we're actually cutting down into the inner core to make more of a shaved surface instead. We'll take a look at that in some other examples. So here again, we're talking about the diamond cut of these date palms. This is a different form that was done on these palms. This is more what they call a macho cut, where basically they shave these boots straight up. So the boot is still attached, and they're shaving the face of it. You notice it changes the higher up we go, where the boot's coming out more horizontally, you get more of a flat diamond effect, which actually looks pretty good. Whereas these down here, they're still attached, still big, give a bigger face on it, but it gives a smoother face compared to the diamond block, which is really hard to create with just a chainsaw or other cutting devices. So this is a canary date palm, Phoenix canariensis, very similar to the date palms we've been looking at, which is Phoenix dactylifera. The dactylifera is the standard Phoenix date palm, as we call them, because they produce actual dates that are edible. This Phoenix canariensis, though it doesn't produce edible fruit, is famous for this great classic, what we call a pillar and a ball shaped formation. Very big, bold, classy tree, looks handsome, very thick and mature, has a similar system, but the trunk has a more shaved, flat, uniform look instead of that diamond pattern that we're used to seeing there. Instead, this is shaved up along that interior, internal trunk structure, and then we create the ball at the top made out of those boot heads that we shave and sculpt that into a ball form on the canary date palm, whereas on the Phoenix date palm, it's more of what we call a nut of a smaller ball figuration. So this is another very common condition with these date palms, is they have these root bases that are exposed. Oftentimes they will actually start to grow and get what's called aerial roots. The aerial roots will sprout out and sometimes grow, but usually they desiccate and die because they're exposed to air. Roots can't grow in air, so they dry up and they die, and then they just become tough tissue on the outside. What this does show is the structure. This is called a pseudobark. It's not bark like on a normal tree bark, it's the living part of the tree. This is an outer covering that covers the interior trunk of the tree. On top of that, these are those boot bases. This is the petiole base that's left over from the fronds that are growing on and attached to the pseudobark as that goes up the tree. And again, those boots are what create that diamond pattern we've been talking about. So if you could follow me, we'll take a walk over here to this other tree. These boots were actually cut and kept a bit longer. You can see how long they were cut of the fronds that were taken off. These actually could be on there quite tight, or they can bust loose. Sometimes they're on there very tight, like that one, which this breaks, but it's still attached to the base. Other times they'll crack loose, and it'll crack off down interior. The The problem is it gives you this jagged effect, and this has to either be cut with a chainsaw, which is not an exact science and can leave slash marks if you cut too deep. So it's very difficult to get that. This is why we talked about those alternative systems where we go to shaving the trunk to either the macho or all the way down to the internal trunk to get more of that shaved thing, similar to what we saw on the canary date palm. So here again, date palm, nice diamond cut. These are the original diamond cuts that were done back in the field when this came out of the ground. So you can see how these nice even zigzag effect is making a nice pattern. As this goes on up, we get up the thing. These were nice, beautiful 25-foot palms when they started. Here's where the old boots were. If you see the discoloration, the dark spot, and then above that with loose boots and the ragged stubs on the inner core. This was shaved away to make a nice smooth trunk, and then we were able to create the nut at the top, the nice ball that separates the head and gives that nice distinctive classic date palm feature. And you've got a beautiful palm, or as best we can make out of it. So here we have some date palms. Had similar types of effect, nice big tall palms, but they had boots attached to them. Up here at this other point, we can see where the excess boots were knocked off, but it had to be shaved down to the inner core to create that smoother effect and then create the nut at the top. So here we have a diamond cut base, as you see coming up. And at this point, they had the boots sticking out, but they attempted to go ahead and create this diamond cut by coming in with a chainsaw. It did create the things, you notice a sharp angle, very distinct, but also these cuts, these gouges into the backside as the chainsaw went across and actually slashed into the boot behind it, making these little marks. Very difficult to do these cuts and not have that effect, and it creates more of an unnatural, very pointed effect. As the thing goes up, as we've seen, it changes to the inner core. You can see how that boot structure changes, where those boots aren't even available to be done. This has to be done to that shaved smoothing off of the inner core rather than the actual attempt to recreate the diamond effect.